everyone, and welcome. My name is Juan Cabrera. I am a partnership specialist here at InquireEd, and we're very excited for you to join us on our special webinar, Choosing Your Path, Advice from District Leaders on Elementary Social Studies. Now, we knew that a lot of you have reached out to us and are figuring out how you can implement inquiry journeys in your district and in your classroom. So we wanted to bring you some experiences from directors from different school districts around the country. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Now, today we are going to be discussing the rollout and implementation for our Inquiry Journeys digital curriculum. And what you'll see throughout today is we're going to be discussing that rollout of the Inquiry Journeys K-6 curriculum. This curriculum supports culturally responsive education and instruction. It brings those diverse viewpoints and perspectives into the classroom. It not only does that, but it helps to develop inquiry-based teaching and learning. It also aligns to national social studies and ELA standards, and it connects to high quality and diverse sources. Those are all topics we're going to talk about today, as well as that implementation process. But before we get to some of our special guests today, I'd like to bring on Sarah Milo-Hoskow, who is the Director of Partner Experience at InquireEd. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you. Well, I am going to just kick us off with a little bit of an orientation from the partner experience perspective, because at InquireEd, we're the ones who really partner with district leaders as they think about launching their implementation of inquiry journeys and having success throughout that implementation. So what we do in partner experience is two of the big parts of our role is one is to provide thought partnership and codified processes to support district leaders in facilitating a strong implementation of inquiry journeys. And then we also provide professional learning and development rooted in the curriculum to build capacity for inquiry-based instruction. So this idea of building district-based capacity or school-based capacity is really important to us as we partner with schools and districts. I love this graphic because I think it's why a strong partnership and really thoughtful implementation is so important. So what we see here is a curve that shows kind of an individual's response to challenge and how they grow in the face of this challenge. And this is really relevant here because as we think of implementing a new social studies curriculum, an inquiry-based social studies curriculum, chances are you are presenting teachers with a new challenge, with perhaps the challenge is just that it's a new curriculum. That is challenging. Wrapping your head around any new curriculum is a lot of work. But also we know from our partnerships with schools and districts across the country that Inquiry Journeys presents other challenges, which are for many schools and districts, social studies has been backburnered for years. So it's not just a new curriculum, it's a new discipline that they're teaching. And then in addition to that, Inquiry Journeys is really thoughtfully designed to be inquiry-based. So students are having inquiry-based learning experiences, and that means teachers are using inquiry-based teaching practices. And this instructional model also might be new for teachers. So with this newness, we know that teachers need support. And what we want is to help teachers grow, and they need to be in this stretch zone to grow. So what we're going to go through in the early part of this webinar is thinking about the different ways we can provide the just right supports to teachers so that they stay in this stretch zone, they're growing, and they are implementing, they're not staying where they're comfortable, maybe not starting your new curriculum, and they're not in the panic zone. They don't try it, feel like it's not working, and stop. We need teachers for a strong implementation. We need them in this stretch zone. And the way we do this is through curriculum-based professional learning. And what we like to think about at InquireEd is curriculum-based professional learning sort of has 3 cogs to it. The first cog is super important to curriculum-based professional learning. It's the curriculum. It's those high quality instructional materials that teachers are using on a regular basis with their students. And those materials are designed to support them in inquiry-based instruction, high quality social studies. And so for us, that's inquiry journeys, our high quality social studies material. Then we know teachers need ongoing support. They need to be part of learning communities. They need opportunities to reflect and adjust their moves through maybe conversations with PLCs or coaches. And so there's coaching and learning communities. That's another cog to this kind of curriculum-based professional learning machine we have here. And then finally, instructional leadership. What can you as a district leader and the other leaders in school buildings or that you work with, what can be done to promote the growth and learning for teachers so that students are getting the best social studies instruction that they can get? And one reason why I love this graphic is, like any machine with multiple cogs, we know if you turn one of those cogs, the others are going to turn. But if you turn all the cogs, maybe it's going to turn faster and the machine is going to work better. And as an individual, you can turn the cog that is relevant to your role, and it's going to help the other cogs get turning. So in this case, we're thinking about how can we really get that high quality social studies instruction, those materials to be used on a regular basis with fidelity. Well, we're going to think about what can instructional leadership or district leaders do to promote that and ensure that. So in partner experience, we work with district leaders as they go through these 5 phases of implementation or 5 stages of curriculum implementation. If you're here on this webinar, you are likely in the explore phase of this. You are just getting oriented. You're just starting to, I'll go more in detail of what each of these stages mean as we go through this, but you're kind of just at that phase of making some curricular decisions. But then we're going to move into design, where you're making some decisions about how you want to implement, deploy, starting to get people going with the curriculum. Implementation, that phase is year 1. That's when we're seeing the curriculum being used in classrooms. And then finally, sustain. That's after year 1, as you move into year 2+, there are still decisions and moves you can make as a district leader to ensure strong use of the curriculum. And so in this webinar, we're really going to focus on explore and design, because that's where I think most of you are at this moment. So here we are in the explore phase, and you are really finalizing your curricular decisions. Maybe you're still deciding between 1 or 2 curricula, or maybe you're going to work with inquiry journeys and you're starting to wrap your head around what is that going to look like. And the goal in this stage is to build your background knowledge about the program and the supports associated with it. So if you're on this webinar, you're doing the right thing. You're building your background knowledge about the program and supports associated with it. And you might immerse yourself in some other resources, like reading about curriculum-based instructional learning or anything else like that, that might help you think about how your next year is going to go. And then in partner experience, we will meet with you to kick off the design stage. So we work with district partners to think about some really important decisions they will make in the design stage. So this is after you've made your curricular decision, but before you're getting people started with the curriculum. And in this phase, you're thinking about what are your implementation goals? What do you hope to achieve in year 1? You're thinking about your implementation plan. Who's going to use the curriculum? Which schools, which teachers, which grades, at which frequency? And then finally, how are you going to offer the supports to teachers so they can be successful and ensure that their students are getting the social studies you hope they get? So let's dig a little bit deeper into these three ideas: goals, implementation plan, and support structures. So one of the first things we encourage district leaders to start thinking about are, what are your implementation goals? And these will be the foundational goals that your other design decisions will be based upon. As you go through your first year, these goals will provide that backboard for reflection. You'll be able to think back, what were my goals and are we working towards achieving them? And then maybe you might make some adjustments, adjust your moves as a leader to make sure you are progressing towards your goals. And when district leaders set their goals, we really think there's one key challenge here, and that's to move from like the lofty and aspirational to the specific and observable and actionable goals. So I want to share some examples here of some district goals, what district goals might look like. Often as we talk to districts, it starts with, we want teachers to embrace the inquiry process. And as we discuss, we can think about, well, what does that actually mean? Can you describe that to me? So now, okay, what does it look like when teachers embrace the inquiry process? We will see students initiating their inquiry units by generating questions. We will see evidence of student-led investigation, artifacts around the classrooms of student-led investigation. And we will see examples of students taking action as they culminate their units. So if we can see those things, if those are taking place, then we know teachers are embracing the inquiry process. Or perhaps teachers implement the curriculum. Well, what specifically does that mean? It might mean teachers complete one full unit in their first semester, and that teachers are really focusing on core lessons and not worrying about extension lessons. So getting specific of what is it we mean by teachers implement the curriculum. So again, in the design phase, the first thing we do is we set like observable, actionable goals. And then based on those goals, it's important that district leaders begin to think about, well, what is our implementation plan? And I want to be really clear. There's no one right way to do this. And we see different districts approach their implementation plan in different ways based on what is happening in their context. So some of the questions you might ask yourself at this point is, who will implement the curriculum in year one? How much of the curriculum will teachers move through in this year? And what is the cadence or frequency of instruction? And we have seen different things when it comes to cadence and frequency. So we've seen some districts say, perhaps we're going to alternate between science and social studies. And maybe people say, we want social studies to instruction to occur all year long. What's important is that you establish that plan and you're clear on that plan. So we've seen some examples of implementation plans that are, we want full district adoption in year one. We want everyone doing the entire curriculum. We've seen districts say, you know what? For a strong implementation, we want to start small. We're going to start with a subset of schools and really get strong implementation in some schools to serve as a model for when we go district-wide. And then we've seen other districts say, we're going to work with a subset of teachers. So maybe all of your schools are implementing, but there are some teachers in those buildings using inquiry journeys in year one, knowing you're going to move to full adoption in year two. And we've seen other districts say, we're having an opt-in model. What is important is that plan is clear and communicated clearly to the district and the teachers and the building leaders. And then this idea of frequency, or how much curriculum districts will move through. Again, we've seen different examples. We've seen partner examples where districts have said, in year one, we want everyone to move through one unit, and then in year two, it's going to be 2 to 3 units in that year. So building up over time. We've seen kind of districts take the approach of different amounts of instruction or usage of inquiry journeys in different grade levels. So there's a district in Wisconsin that said, in K through 3rd grade, we're going to have, our goal is 1 unit in year 1. But in 4th and 5th grade, where the teachers have more familiarity with social studies, maybe they have more designated social studies time, we really want those teachers to move through 3 units. So again, you can see in these examples, there's no one right way to do it. District leaders are really thinking about what is appropriate in our context. And if you can think back to that stretch zone graph, what is going to be the right amount to bite off that really keeps teachers in that stretch zone so that they're using the curriculum. And then with what frequency of instruction. So, you know, here we really, this is, I think, I want to really emphasize the importance of time and a district's leader's role in thinking about time. So we want to, some district leaders are saying there's a minimum allocated number of minutes for instruction for social studies. And, you know, if a district leader is setting that expectation, where we see this being really successful is that they're thinking broadly about, well, how many minutes are in the day? What are expectations in other grade level, other subject areas? And is this minimum time reasonable? Am I setting an expectation that is reasonable? Another example of like frequency of instruction is related to that idea of how are teachers balancing their instruction with other subject areas. So we often hear people talking about, are they instructing science and social studies at the, you know, in the same week? Are they alternating units? Are they alternating days? So being really clear about expectations around frequency of your instruction is a really important part of setting your implementation plan and making sure any of those expectations are reasonable for the other demands that are on scheduling and on teachers. Now we're going to start thinking in the design phase. So again, this is in the time where you're imagining how this is going to unfold. You're making key decisions about how your year is going to unfold. We really encourage district leaders to start thinking about how will teachers receive support as they implement inquiry journeys. And we think there are 3 keys to really successful growth as teachers use inquiry journeys. One key is it's super important that districts are building capacity and local expertise. We don't believe it's successful for inquiry journeys or for Inquire Ed to be your key lever of support. We want you to be building up this capacity within your district. We also believe, foundational to our kind of beliefs about this, is that individuals develop expertise gradually through practice and reflection. So this is true for teachers as they use the curriculum, and is true as district leaders or other folks you're going to tap into to lead this work, that you will be building your familiarity, you will be building your understanding over time, and that's to be expected. And that is where we get that deep learning and expertise. And then finally, as teachers use inquiry journeys, we support their growth through ongoing opportunities for reflection, continuous support, positive accountability, so accountability with encouragement, and opportunities for feedback. So we have a key lever for providing this kind of support, for making sure these keys to implementation are taking place. And we this lever is the inquiry advocate. And an inquiry advocate is an individual or a group of individuals that a district leader identifies who are going to be flag bearers and offer support to other teachers as they implement inquiry journeys. So an inquiry advocate supports and motivates teachers to implement their inquiry-based curriculum. But really, an inquiry advocate is that on-the-ground person who's going to help teachers stay in the stretch zone. So even though we know we're being thoughtful about how much of the curriculum we're expecting of teachers to instruct and selecting the just right schools to do this, maybe that's all your schools, or maybe it's a subset of schools, we still know, even with those implementation plan decisions in place, teachers are going to need support as they're using a new curriculum, potentially engaging in a new subject area, and potentially shifting their practice to inquiry. And the inquiry advocate is the person who can offer that support. So what does it look like when an inquiry advocate is offering the support? What are the actions? What does this look like? It looks like many of these things, or all of these things ideally: observation and feedback, thought partnership through challenges, collaborative planning opportunities, opportunities to unpack the curriculum, to really understand how it fits together, the structure of the curriculum. So unpacking units, unpacking lessons. It looks like collectively deepening expertise in the curriculum and the practices. So teachers are doing that, but inquiry advocates are doing that as well. It can look like modeling of inquiry journeys in action. So seeing the opportunity to see someone else instruct a lesson. And it's facilitation of teacher orientation sessions. So to kick off a year, every teacher will engage in an orientation session. And we think it's super powerful if inquiry advocates are the facilitators of these sessions. And then finally, inquiry advocates are people who can celebrate the success of teachers and students as they use the curriculum. So who are these inquiry advocates? Who can do this type of work? And how does InquireEd support inquiry advocates in doing this type of work? So let's talk about how InquireEd supports our inquiry advocates. Inquiry advocates, once they're selected, they have an orientation, 2-hour orientation session where they really dig into what is this role? What is the work I am stepping into as an identified inquiry advocate? And then again, going back to that core assumption that people deepen their practice over, deepen their understanding over time and through practice, we stick with our inquiry advocates over the course of the year. We offer a 9-session inquiry advocate course, and you can see the topics of the course represented here on the slide. And inquiry advocates engage in 1 session per month. So we don't expect inquiry advocates to start the year as experts in every element of inquiry-based social studies instruction. But we do know that over the year, they can deepen this understanding. And as they're doing that, they can still provide thought partnership to teachers, support celebrations of success, and model that ability to learn as you go and deepen your practice over time. So who are inquiry advocates? Well, in every district, there are different reasons to choose different inquiry advocates. So you might be tapping into different roles than another inquiry or another district using inquiry journeys. So in some districts, we see teacher leaders are our inquiry advocates. In other districts, we see instructional coaches serving as inquiry advocates. We've seen deans or assistant principals or building principals serve as inquiry advocates. What is important is whoever is in this role is engaging in the ongoing learning and is offering the support to teachers. We've also seen different models or structures for how you distribute inquiry advocates across your district. So sometimes we see inquiry advocates are supporting a collection of schools. Sometimes we see that there is one inquiry advocate per school. And sometimes we see inquiry advocates identified because districts want an inquiry advocate in every grade. And then we've seen combinations of all of this. So we've had districts say, we're going to have one inquiry advocate in every grade in every school. So there is no one right way to do this. And you can have varied structures based on the, personnel who would be the right fit for your district. So as you're thinking about who might be my inquiry advocates, you're thinking about this in your context, you might think about who has the capacity to offer all those different types of supports to teachers. And in reality, we know you might say, I can think of like great people to serve as inquiry advocates, but perhaps they don't have the capacity to do everything that was identified as support inquiry advocates provide to teachers. So some questions you that might start rattling around in your head is, I really think I might choose, instructional coaches to be my inquiry advocates, but can they do all the things an inquiry advocate should do? You might ask yourself the questions, do these inquiry advocates I'm thinking of identifying, do they have dedicated release time to get into classrooms to observe and provide feedback? They may or may not. Do the inquiry advocates have the ability to hold time for PLCs or collaborative planning? The just right people for you, they may or they may not. And so what I want to share here is like, we've said inquiry advocates do all of these things, but you may be finding the just right people who can't do all of the things identified as providing support to teachers. And so I wanted to show some examples. This is an example of a district who has identified teacher leaders, so full-time classroom teachers, to be their inquiry advocates. So these inquiry advocates are going through the 9-session course. They're deepening their understanding of inquiry-based teaching practices. They're deepening their understanding of inquiry-based social studies, and they're becoming deeply familiar with inquiry journeys. But what you can see here is these teacher leaders don't have the capacity to provide all the types of supports that would be helpful for teachers. And so this district leader has identified, okay, if my inquiry advocate teacher leaders can't do all of it, some of that support role will still, I will carry that. It will rest on me. So while maybe teacher leaders are holding collaborative planning sessions in their grade level teams, they're not necessarily getting into classrooms for observation and feedback. Or perhaps these inquiry advocates are having the ability to model inquiry journeys in their classroom. They can invite other teachers in to see them teach, but they're not necessarily the ones facilitating the teacher orientation sessions. The district leader is going to do that. In this model, what I love that is clear is both the district leader and the teacher leaders are providing thought partnership to other teachers as they encounter challenges, and everyone together is deepening their expertise in the curriculum and in the practices. This is a different example from a different district where coaches with enough capacity to provide all of the supports were identified as inquiry advocates. And in this case, more of that, the responsibility for supporting teachers rests in the role of the inquiry advocate. So in this case, the coaches might be doing collaborative planning, celebrating success, facilitating the onboarding sessions, and less falls on the shoulder of the district leaders. And what's important here is that these decisions are made based on the real capacity of the individuals you've identified as inquiry advocates. And this is the type of thought partnership that Partner Experience will engage with you in thinking about, well, what is my reality and how can I structure my inquiry advocates? Who can I select and what can I expect of them? Which gets us to the next stage of implementation, which is the deploy stage. And this is where you are reaching out to your inquiry advocates and you're getting them on board for that role. You're communicating expectations at this point. You have your implementation plan, you have your goals, you know who your inquiry advocates are. So you're communicating your expectations to everyone. You're holding your orientation sessions so that everyone is prepared to use the curriculum at the beginning of the year. And also as a district leader, I'm sure you know there's a lot of operational tasks that go with this. You're making sure everyone has access to their accounts, all those little operational tasks that need to take place for smooth implementation. After the deploy stage, you're going to move into implementation. You're going to implement. And this is year one. And now that you're in year one, teachers are instructing using inquiry journeys. Inquiry advocates are building that expertise through the 9-session course, and they're supporting teachers. And as a district leader, you're taking the time, and partner experience at InquireEd provides the structures to step back, reflect on those goals you set in the design stage, and make adjustments. Maybe you're identifying that you thought inquiry advocates had the capacity to get into classrooms and observe and give feedback, and you're realizing they don't. Well, you might adjust so that teachers are still getting that feedback. And finally, at the end of year one, we shift into the sustain phase, and this sustain is ongoing. So you again have opportunities to reflect on your goals, perhaps set different goals for year two, and make some adjustments here. And that reflection and adjusting is ongoing. It occurs throughout year two, year three, year four, and ongoing. So that is probably a lot to digest. I know that a blog post always comes out after the webinar with summarizing a lot of this, the thoughts and ideas that come out in the webinar, but that's a brief orientation to the stages of implementation and really a deep dive in the design stage where you're making a lot of key decisions that are going to impact your first year.
Thank you, Sarah. That was wonderful and incredible information. I think it feels good to be supported, right? I think we can walk away now knowing the support that InquireEd is going to provide you, your staff, your educators, and more. And to let everybody know, I know some people have chatted in already. We welcome chat questions. If you want to get into the chat and ask any questions, I will be there answering. We actually had a question, Sarah, that I want to ask you, and I know you're going to be involved in the upcoming conversation. Before we introduce Anne, we had a question on, can inquiry advocates get graduate credit for participating in courses? What type of credit, or is there any kind of certifications they can achieve?
That is a great question. So we can provide, and we do provide for folks who go through that 9-session course, a certificate of completion. And then districts have different abilities to provide different types of credit for that. So if there is a way to get graduate credit associated with that in your district or in your state, you can apply for that. But we've also seen districts give kind of district badging or accreditation that is relevant to your role in the district. And we've seen also districts associate completing this course or going through this course with stipends or roles in their district. So we are not affiliated with any graduate courses, but we can talk to you and work with you to think about what's the best way to, because we really believe teachers or inquiry advocates are doing deep work and learning really incredible practices and application. And so we want people to get the credit that's relevant to them in their context. So we can work with you and Thought Partner on that.
Thank you, Sarah. And I know Sarah will be a part of this upcoming panel discussion. And with that, I'm now going to introduce our Senior Partnerships Executive here at InquireEd, Ann Matz.
Thank you, Juan. And thank you, Sarah, for setting the stage for this discussion. I am so happy to introduce our guests. As Juan said, I'm a Senior Partnerships Executive. So I work with many of the participants on this call as they're in the explore stage, but I also work with my colleagues on the partnerships team. So we have other partnerships executives and partnership specialists who are working with those of you in the explore phase before we get ready to hand you off to our partner experience team. With us today for a panel discussion on their implementation of inquiry journeys, we have two very thoughtful district leaders, which I'm happy to welcome to the webinar. And we have Liz Tridon is joining us. Liz is the Social Studies Director at Detroit Public Schools Community District. And we have Elaine Santelmann. Elaine is the K-12 Science and Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator at Lowell Public Schools in Massachusetts. And both Liz and Elaine are about 2/3 of the way through their first year of implementing inquiry journeys. And I'd like to start off with you, Elaine. Can you just give us a very brief description of the Lowell School District?
Oh, I'd be happy to. So Lowell is a mid-sized city in Massachusetts, originally a mill city. We've got about 15,000 students, many from all around the world. So we have a large proportion of newcomers, English language learners. We have, so we've been implementing inquiry journeys in our 15 elementary schools. So those are the K-4 students, and then our 5th grade as well, which happens to be in 9 middle schools.
Okay.
So it's,
And Elaine, if I remember correctly, you all did not pilot last year, but you jumped right in with implementation.
Jumped right in, yes.
Okay, wonderful. So we have others out there like you. So it's good to hear your perspective. Liz, can you share a little bit about your district?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Detroit Public Schools Community District is a district with about 50,000 students, 107 schools. 80, a little more than 80 of those are K-8s and about 24 high schools. And we implemented inquiry journeys, this is our year 1, in 27 K-8 schools. So we're a small pilot, small for us, but looking to scale up as we go along. So that's how we began our journey.
Great. And so Liz, maybe we'll start with you. Liz, though Liz calls it a pilot, we don't, at Inquire Ed, we don't call it a pilot. When you do a full year, when teachers are teaching all 3 units, we call that implementation. But what Liz described is they didn't do this with all 80 of those K-8 schools right off the bat. They chose a subset of those schools. So Liz, can you talk about what your goals were, how you chose the subset of schools that would start, and how you began the implementation?
Sure, yeah. So we had a couple of really big goals. One was to build excitement around social studies. In our last few years that I've been with the district, we struggled, and that's probably true for a lot of schools in the nation, with honoring instructional minutes for social studies. And we wanted to bring excitement to the district around social studies and become a visionary in the state in leading social studies curriculum. And so that was our first, that really guided all of our decisions along the way. And so in order to have our schools implement inquiry journeys, we decided to go the volunteer route versus the voluntold route. And so we were really thoughtful in planning of what the opt-in structure would look like. So we held engagement sessions, both for teachers and for principals, separately. Then we engaged them in a feedback survey that told us, based on that informational session, were they a yes, a maybe, or a no, and why for each of those things, so that we could have feedback. If they said no, why did they feel like it was a no, so that we could think about, what were the different factors around the no, and how could we address that moving forward. And then we tapped into, well, I don't know. Do you want me to talk about inquiry advocates right now? Or we'll get to that.
No, let's hold on to that. We'll
Okay.
go to that later. Thanks,
Okay.
Liz. Yeah. So your goals were to have this subset of schools implement the 3 or 4 units across a year
Yep,
and to build excitement.
Yep,
Yeah.
so a full year implementation of all of the units that our office would select. And then in that subset of schools.
And Liz, has your goal shifted at all throughout this school year, or have you stuck with those goals?
We have stuck with those goals, but we've added a couple of strategies to build capacity in our teachers, including collaboration walks to see inquiry journeys in action, and build, I don't want to say model classrooms, but use where inquiry journeys is excelling and tapping into those teachers to lead cross school and across the district meetings. We're calling them success meetings, about where those teachers have found success, and how other teachers who are in different, variations of their journey might learn from the field.
Wonderful. So really building excitement, really sounds like you're taking an asset-based approach to that, celebrating successes within this subset of schools, within classrooms, and bringing others to see that success. Is that
Exactly. Yep,
wonderful?
exactly.
Great. Elaine, can you talk about your first year? What were your goals, and how did you plan to roll out inquiry journeys?
So my initial goal, which I still stick with, is that I wanted teachers to become comfortable with teaching through inquiry. And we started off with all of our K-5 teachers, except for there are some K-2 teachers that are not going to implement until next year because they were also implementing a new phonics program this year. So I was cognizant of the fact I did not want to overwhelm them with too much all at once. But we did not have an elementary social studies curriculum prior to inquiry journey. So in a real sense, there was a vacuum there for social studies. And what I'd been hearing from teachers is that they want to teach social studies. They love teaching social studies. And so there was a real desire to put something in place. And here in Massachusetts, our social studies standards are just as much about inquiry as they are about content. So I was delighted to find inquiry journeys because it fit what we were looking for very well. So in a sense, teachers are choosing their own pace at which they implement the program. So as I've been going around and talking to teachers, I see some that are moving briskly, very engaged, and I see others that are a little more tentative and just trying to get used to a new pedagogy and even used to teaching social studies at all. So I think that it's not a consistent implementation across the district. I'm giving teachers a little breathing room to implement this at a pace that works for them, because I know across the country this has been an unusual year. I think that's stating it mildly, but what I did not want to do was overwhelm teachers with something new and challenging when they are already struggling with so many other things in the classroom. I wanted this to be something that they're embracing, not something that feels like something that's adding stress.
Yeah. Elaine, a couple questions, follow-up questions. My memory is when you selected inquiry journeys, were rather new to the district. And I know we have others on this call who are new to their districts or rolling out a curriculum for the first time, new to their role. So Is that accurate? You were new to the district?
Yes, yep.
Okay. And you said one of your goal, not one of your main goal, was that teachers become comfortable with inquiry-based teaching.
Mhm.
What does that look like for you? What specifically, what evidence are you looking for in that comfort?
A big piece of it is turning responsibility for the learning over from the teacher to the student. And that's a shift that we're trying to make across the curriculum, that, seeing less teachers teachers delivering content and more of students asking questions, students investigating, collaborating, talking with each other to discover the content. And another really important feature is to support students with asking the big questions, because our standards here in Massachusetts are very detailed and rigorous. And that is overwhelming because the scope of it is so broad. It can be a deterrent to even wanting to teach social studies. And so I find that using an inquiry approach helps teachers and students focus on the big ideas, which are hopefully the ones that they'll take away and remember over time.
And then Elaine, you mentioned just kind of letting teachers ease into it. Some are going more briskly, some are a little more hesitant. Do you have a timeline in your head when you'd like full implementation of the whole curriculum, or are you not there yet?
Yeah, I mean, my goal is in year 2 to have a more robust implementation. I know we all hope that next year is going to be a more normal school year where, it's more reasonable to have higher expectations. And so my goal this year is for teachers to give it a try. And the way that's looking is different at different grade spans, I'm finding. So because at K-4, we didn't really have a social studies curriculum, the teachers are teaching the program with more fidelity, because this is all they've known. Whereas it's interesting at grade 5, being in our middle schools, there's always been time for social studies. Those teachers are familiar with the content. So what is tricky for them is using an inquiry approach to teach it. So
Interesting.
yeah. So they, in some cases, they don't want to let go of
Mhm.
lessons that they've loved teaching. And so I'm trying to support them with framing that within an inquiry framework. So it's a lot of meeting teachers where they are.
Yeah.
In the hope that over time it will be more sustainable.
Thanks. Sarah, we've got two, in their first year of implementation here. Do you have any notes from the field, kind of, maybe someone who's 2 or 3 years into implementation, how those district goals have shifted from first year to second year?
Yeah, I can think of a couple different examples. I think we've definitely had really strategic from the beginning goals that are, we just want folks to go through one unit this year. We don't care if they get it done in the fall or if they get it done in the spring, but we want everyone to complete one unit. And then by year 2, the expectation is really clear. Now you're familiar with the curriculum. We would like you to do all the units in your grade level. So that is something we've seen. I can think of a number of districts who've taken that approach. I think there are other districts who said, we're implementing the full curriculum across all our grades. We're going for it. And I think what's interesting there is there are always reticent people. There are always people scared to take the plunge or anxious about giving up instruction that they love. Elaine, you talked about that. And so as their goals over, year 2 or 3 are, how do I reach these teachers that need support in kind of getting on board, still honoring the way that they, the things that they love to teach, and helping them to start using the curriculum in a way that feels exciting and respectful of those teachers. So those are two really different models. One is bite off something small and grow over time. And then the other is go big and then kind of go fill in where people need more scaffolding and support in years 2 and 3.
Thanks. Liz and Elaine, you both mentioned instructional time for social studies. I know we could have a whole webinar on how you negotiated for instructional time, but if you could just say very briefly things you did in your district to ensure the schools that were part of that subset, Liz or Elaine, the grade levels, the schools where you wanted to use this, that teachers had the instructional time that they needed to implement the curriculum. Liz, I'll start with you on that.
Sure. I would say that we had a two-pronged approach. The first was that we held collaborative meetings with our ELA, colleagues. So our ELA curriculum department, we held multiple collaborative meetings to stress the importance of social studies. Because what we found was that it was a messaging issue. So we had to get the messaging right. And then I know we're going to talk about inquiry advocates a little bit later, but that was another really important part of our approach, is that we tapped into our inquiry advocates our master teachers in English. So our master teachers are the lead teachers in their building supporting ELA. And because those master teachers could see the importance of social studies and how it supported both ELA and students' critical skill development, all the things that come from the inquiry journeys, we solved the messaging issue. So we had that support built in from ELA, and those master teachers in their buildings could then support honoring the instructional minutes in all the ELA classrooms, if they were, self-contained or not self-contained, but that we were trying to get at the messaging piece. And that's the way that we approached it.
So Liz, do teachers in your district then think of social studies as part of ELA?
I mean, I think that's unique to our district in the way that we rolled out new curriculum across various content areas. And so that was unique to us. And we knew that we had to combat that initial messaging around our ELA curriculum. So unique to our situation, we really tried to do a root cause analysis and say, why are teachers having trouble fitting in the minutes for social studies? Where did that message come from? We got to that root cause and then attacked that root cause with our strategy. Thanks.
How about you, Elaine?
Yeah, so when I was in my explore phase with thinking about inquiry journeys, I started thinking about what the obstacles might be to a successful implementation and how I could remove those obstacles as much as possible before launching the program. So I knew that one of the obstacles, especially at K-4, was because we had had no curriculum, there was all the time that it might have ever been dedicated to social studies had basically been written out of the schedule. So I had to, so I met with my fellow curriculum coordinators to talk about time on learning and how many minutes each of us really wanted for our different subject areas, especially focusing on the English language arts, because I knew any minutes I was going to get for social studies would mostly come from that subject area. Excuse me. And so we did actually come up with a recommended number of minutes that we presented to principals at a leadership meeting. Our schools are very autonomous, so all we can really do is make recommendations and try to present a powerful argument about why that's important. And so we did that at a meeting. And I've noticed that, well, most of the teachers, I have to say, are telling me that their principals did change up the schedule, did include more time for science and social studies. So apparently our argument was successful. And that's made a huge difference with teachers just feeling like they have the breathing room to implement this. And also part of that process was we had a training session, and you remember this, that it was inquiry for school leaders. So it was a whole pitch to try to get leaders on board with why teaching through inquiry is important, and therefore why you should build more time for this in your school schedule.
Okay. Elaine, we'll stick with you. Who did you choose as your inquiry advocates and why? And how has that been working for you?
Yeah, so again, and through collaboration with our English language arts coordinator, we worked on this together and decided that our literacy coaches, we have one at every building, that would be the best for our district for the inquiry advocates, mostly because they already are in a coaching role. And so they already have those relationships built with teachers. And then, with the training that they would be able to support teachers with the rollout. It's been, the reality has been kind of interesting. I think we happened to pick people that were already very overwhelmed with other responsibilities, because, English language arts includes a lot on its own without adding on social studies. So in hindsight, I think I might have gone with teacher leaders instead, simply because I think what our teachers need is somebody who's actually teaching the program as a model teacher that really, even though they would only know their particular grade level, that they would be really developing skills in teaching through inquiry, and that they would have artifacts that they could actually show the teachers. So I think, we're getting there, but I think if I'd started with teacher leaders, I think I might have had a faster implementation.
Right. Liz, anything to add to were you happy with your choice of inquiry advocates? Anything you would change there?
Yeah, I mean, I can relate a lot to what Elaine is saying about, the workload of your inquiry advocates. That's an important consideration. And our master teachers do a lot in their release time, and they teach half the day. So there's a lot on their plate, but they're doing a wonderful, phenomenal job. And they are, for the most part, also teaching the curriculum. So they can be that embedded support for their colleagues, and also the champion of the work. So we're really happy and know that we still have work to do, but excited for the future of those inquiry advocates supporting this rollout.
Great. Okay, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'm happy to open it up to questions that we have from some of our webinar participants. So Juan, do you have any questions coming in that you would like to ask?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I had a great question that popped up in the chat. And I think people are very appreciative, Elaine and Liz, of your willingness to share your process with us. I think people are really appreciative of that. And we had someone ask, and this is a question for you, Anne. Let me read it. If we wanted to get in touch with school leaders in our state or similar sized districts, is that something that is possible, or could you provide reference points?
Absolutely. Those of you who are on the call, if you'd ask your connection on the partnerships team, whether you're working with Juan or Christine or Megan or me, just reach out and we can, if your priority is someone in your state, we can connect you with someone in your state. If your priority is similar size, we can connect you there. And then know that too, Sarah mentioned this launch call. When you have that launch call, our partner experience team has a wealth of experience with different districts, and so they will also share with you experiences from the field. Well, some other districts your size have done this, and some have done this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ann. And I see some questions, which Ann, you yourself have answered these in our chat, but
Yeah.
could you elaborate a little more? Because I think there's a lot of excitement around the inquiry advocates. We had some questions about when are these courses offered? And is it something that InquireEd is actually offering ourselves, or is the district having to start this initiative for inquiry advocates? Can you talk a little bit about that and clarify?
Sure. And then Sarah, chime in if I missed anything. So if an individual school or a small district is subscribing to Inquiry Journeys, we have cohorts. And so when we work with you on that launch, we'll ask you, when would you like to participate in this course? And we'll have, we might have one going on the first Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. Central, at 3 p.m. on the second Wednesday of every month. We'll have a bunch of different cohorts, and you could select your cohort. If you're a medium or large district, we schedule those calls with you and have your inquiry advocates, on those calls. And so those are monthly calls. Again, it might work for you to have it the third Wednesday of every month, again at 3 p.m. Central. So we work on a time that works for you to schedule those. And so Sarah and her partner experience team, the InquireEd implementation coaches, are facilitating those calls with the inquiry advocates.
Wonderful.
I would add on, when you become a partner of an Inquiry Journeys partner, you get partnered with an implementation coach at InquireEd. So this is an individual who their goal is to help you have success. And so they become the thought partner. They facilitate your sessions. Your inquiry advocates can reach out for office hours with an implementation coach if there is a very specific challenge they want to unpack with your coach. So there's a very specific person who learns your context, learns what you're working on, and becomes your touch point once you move into, implementation and you're working with partner experience.
Wonderful. And I know we are right at about time, and some of you are ready to maybe see your family, get dinner started. Others of you are ready to leave your school. We want to thank our panelists today and our attendees, Liz and Elaine. We do very greatly appreciate you for joining us. I know everybody is thankful for the valuable expertise and experience that you provided. We want to thank Ann. We also have Christine, who is on our call. She is another partnerships executive that some of you may have spoken to in the past or continue to speak to. There she is there, smiling and waving. And we want to thank Sarah for joining us as well. And I think everybody can walk away knowing that no matter what situation you're in, no matter how big or small your district is, no matter what your implementation rollout is, we are there to partner with you. And we have experience in all sorts of different types of rollouts and implementation. So we want to thank you. Look out for the recording of this webinar very soon, as well as additional resources. And with that, please feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We hope everyone has a great evening, and we hope you join us soon. Bye-bye.